Thank you so much for joining us. If you're joining us over live stream, we are here in Burbank at Soapbox Films in Stage A. We're right in front of the ARwall. There's a 30 by 12 foot, 1.5 millimeter screen, 6K resolution. And I am Rene Amador. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ARwall. I'm going to be your moderator for this panel from 2 to 3 p.m. today. I have with me two people that I'm happy to be chatting with. First one is Jonny Zeller, a director. Thank you so much for joining us, Jonny.
Happy to be here, yeah.
And then also Jocelyn, the co-founder and president of ARwall.
Hello.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got started in filmmaking?
Well, I'll keep it quick, but I'm a director based here in LA, do a little bit of everything from TV commercial, branded content, Silton fragrance, Toyota car commercials, kind of run the gamut. A little bit of TV and a little bit of feature work.
I guess I started back in high school with this other gentleman over there. We made a short film back in senior year of high school. It was a ninja film, and it was based off of a viral site. So it actually it got over 3 million views. This was before YouTube existed. This was when people were doing dial-up internet, and it was a 15-minute film, and people still, downloaded this and watched it. So that's kind of how I got started. And then since then, went to film school. We started a production company where we did a lot of commercials and pilots and like promos and a lot of like how-to tech videos. And that's how we kind of got into not virtual production, but I guess augmented reality. And so that was kind of how we got into that, and then eventually got into adding the tech to filmmaking, and virtual production is where we kind of landed with ARwall.
Awesome. And for those of you not familiar, I myself am a filmmaker as well as a startup entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. This is a panel of all filmmakers and mostly commercial directors and producers here. So that's mostly what we're going to be talking about from an independent and commercial standpoint, virtual production. So we're going to show a clip from a TV spot that all three of us worked on together. I believe this is the first time this is being screened for an audience. This is a live action and gameplay trailer for Crossfire Sierra Squad. This is a first-person shooter coming out for PlayStation VR 2. Can you tell us briefly in your own words what we're about to see?
So what we wanted to do was create, and I haven't seen it yet, so go easy on me. If you hate it, just tell me it's good, okay? What we wanted to do, the brief from the agency was this idea of how do we connect the in-game footage with live action so that the audience can kind of feel a little bit more connected to it and it feels a bit more human. You're not just watching straight up gameplay footage. The gameplay footage is incredible, but there's something about seeing a real person out there shooting. And so we produced it right here, right where everybody is sitting. It was a ton of fun. We had everything from some dry explosions to lighting gags. We had the whole gamut. And so it was a ton of fun. A whirlwind of a day, but I hope you like it. Again, just tell me it's great, okay?
Jocelyn?
We're going to see a virtual production created commercial. So I think it's about a minute long. And I think, every filmmaker comes up to us and they say, I don't want that background to look super fake. I don't want it to look like a video game. These are actual backdrops. These backdrops were from a video game. But I invite you to take a look and see if it actually looks like it's from a video game when it's behind the actor with all these props and all these cool effects going on at the same time. So yeah, I'm really excited because I think it kind of proves to, creators that it's possible to use like game assets and still make it look super, super real.
Sierra 1, Operation Control clears you for engagement.
Let's go!
Jonny, how did you first get involved in this project?
So the DP, David Clausen, who shot this, he had reached out. He had done some some virtual production XR stuff before. When ARwall was looking for a director, I'm sure they interviewed hundreds of them and they were all no good. And so when I talked with the agency about my vision for it, they said, okay, yeah, let's do this. And it was a crazy timeline. We had like 3 weeks from when I signed, maybe even less, maybe 2.5 weeks, from when I signed on to when we were actually shooting. So it was like time to dive in head first and say, all right, let's figure out how to do it. And we couldn't have done it without everybody on the team saying, we know this timeline is totally screwed. We know that we don't have enough people. We don't have a big enough budget, but everybody's going to step up, do a little bit of extra work to make sure that we got to where we needed to be. So
Awesome. Jocelyn, how did you first get involved in this project?
Well, I was working at ARwall, and we had been doing demos for a lot of agencies and commercial filmmakers for a while, and kind of waiting for the right project to come around. And so Ayzenberg actually had come to check our stage out over at Amen and Amen. It's our partner stage over in Pasadena. It's actually Terry Cruz's stage that we help run. And they had, I don't know, this was months ago when we really talked to them, kind of showed them what the tech could do. And then I think Smilegate came around and said, hey, we want to do this video game ad. It's a VR game. They wanted to make it feel like it was really immersed, you know, like that the actor would really be in that space. So Ayzenberg was like, well, maybe ARwall can help with that. So that's kind of how we got started was.
What is Ayzenberg?
Oh, they're an agency, commercial agency. I think they're pretty well known. You might have heard of them. Ayzenberg saw that could be something we could do, and we rose to the occasion. I think we were really excited to kind of use game assets that already existed and try to see how that might work with virtual production. And since it was already in the same game engine, it was really quick to transition into it. And I think that's what allowed us to get into that 3-week timeline. It was very short. It was almost like not enough time, but just enough for us to make everything work right as we needed to shoot it. And so, yeah, it came together really well.
You said 3-week schedule. Do you mean 3 weeks of pre-production? What was the split between pre-production and production?
I think 3 weeks included production. I think we had maybe 2 weeks of pre-production. So that was like getting the game assets from Smilegate, testing the gameplay in VR so we could get a feel of what that would look like, which our senior engineer actually ended up doing. And I think that was actually really helpful. So then just getting those assets, organizing it all so that we got what shots we needed. I know Jonny was working really hard on making sure that we had a large shot list that basically could hit every exciting point of the game. And so put that all together in about 2 weeks, and then was here on this set for about 2 days of shooting. So yeah, it was quite a quick turnaround.
Great. Jonny, what was your role in pre-production? Did you do anything different because it was a virtual production shoot?
So this was my first time doing a virtual production shoot. I had wanted to work with it for a long time, so I was really excited to actually finally get to do it. And the process, it's a much different way of thinking than what I had been used to. I've done green screen work, and that's similar in the sense that you're not really, you only have a single plane to work with, and so the camera kind of has to adjust and move. One of the things that I really loved about this was we did a screen share with one of the artists from ARwall, and she was using this Xbox controller and flying through the Unreal world. And through screen share, I was like, oh, let's go take a look at that location. Oh, that looks cool. Let's go look over there. And so we were just dropping into these different environments and then kind of panning and tilting around and looking and saying like, okay, no, this doesn't look very good. Maybe we should try this. And then we picked our specific environments. Then we came for a tech scout day. We had the camera with the lenses, and the DP and I looked at the wall and we said, okay, pan here. This is where the frame needs to be. The camera height is this. The focal length is that. And then we gave some notes and we said, it should really be at sunset. Let's turn those lights on. I want an explosion coming out of that building. Give me some bad guys over there. And they were all taking notes and trying to, adjust the world. And then we showed up on set and it was all ready. It was all there. And it was such a fun process. I'm sure most people have been through VFX hell at some capacity where you shoot green or you do even just matte painting or tracking, and you get into post and you're like, shit, this is going to be a pain in the ass, and now we have to delay or we have to spend more money because VFX always costs more than what the bid is, and it delays the project and it adds so much stress. We didn't have any of that. Once we were done shooting, it was done. All we had to do was add muzzle flashes and some particles for bullet ricochets. So it took so much of that stress. I didn't have to worry about, are the VFX artists going to do a good job later? Am I going to have to slog through 50 rounds of notes in post? It was already done. It was already there. So the virtual scouting and the lack of needing to go through the VFX was like, I don't ever want to do a green screen again.
Did you do any post VFX on this project?
We did the muzzle flashes, and we added in some dust hits where bullets were pinging off of things. So
you had bullet hits, muzzle, so everything was relating like guns, safety,
yeah.
Things you couldn't do on set because of safety.
Right, yep. We had a huge full-on set with a lot of practical stuff, so that helped too. So.
Okay, so I've got a surprise for you, Johnny. I stayed up all night and I cut a behind-the-scenes video of the shoot. It's a 5-minute behind-the-scenes video. Hope everyone's impressed.
Yeah, that feels pretty good. Okay. All right, roll sound, roll camera. And
3 Apple, take 1. Mark.
rolling. Everyone's quiet, please. And action. And camera. And action. Very nice. Reset. Back to one. Keep rolling, please. So as if the camera was on that side. Oh, we're okay. Okay.
Six Charlie, take 9. Mark.
And everybody settles. David, tell me you're good.
Set.
That's cool. That looks cool. You want to pull back the virtual camera? Action! Boom. Boom. Where are you? I would just sit down.
Yeah. But it's just simple. It's really simple for like the.
All right, let's give him the grenade. Okay, grenade. Okay, and up again. Yep, there we go. Good. Go. Okay, sit there, change the clip. And grenade. Okay, hold on. It's okay. 3, 2, 1, boom. 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 Three, two, one, wall. One wall.
Strobing, right? Strobing. Okay.
Dolly. Feel.
Yeah, maybe she could just a touch faster.
Dolly. Feel. One more time. Next one.
And boom. All right, let's try that again.
I just need to watch the screen.
Keep rolling. Drop the clip.
That's pretty cool. Let's try that again.
That looked good. Yeah, sweet.
All right. Cool. Cut. Cut.
Nice.
All right. Supervisor White.
No, of course.
Let us know if you
There we go.
do anything. Trying to. All right, Rich, what do you think of this whole video shoot experience?
This was freaking amazing. I felt like a superstar doing this with all those action stunts, and I loved it. I want to do this again.
What did you think of this LED wall technology behind you that you shot against?
This is definitely the future. I want this in my house, so I can film all my sketches with this. Yeah, this is definitely the future. Beat green screen shoot. I hope to see more of this in the future. I think what surprised me was how quick this process was. Like, we were just in there. It's just like very, very fast paced, but I love it.
It was a 2-day production. The first day was half setup, half shoot, and then the second day was a full shoot. Jonny, Jocelyn, tell us about the way virtual production was used in this project.
Well, rather than using green screen, we had the Unreal assets from the game, which was a huge time saver. There are many different ways to utilize virtual production. It could be everything from just stills to plates that you go and shoot practically, all the way to using the Unreal assets. I think that there are pluses and minuses to each one of the different plate options: cost, time, flexibility. So really it depends on what your production needs. And not every production needs full Unreal assets, and sometimes a plate or even a still image still gets you where you want to go.
I think Jonny said it all. I mean, I guess for this specific project, I don't know that we could have actually done this practically in the time frame, because those background assets being already created, and then we just need to optimize them for use on the screen, really saved it a huge amount of time. And then if we were to have done this in green screen, I don't think we would have made the 3-week timeline either, because with the post amount of time required to replace all the green screen stuff, that would definitely add like a few weeks onto the end of this project. So
There's also all that dust and stuff that's particularly difficult to do with green screen. So, okay, so just want to clarify for everyone, you're saying the assets that people saw for the environments, those were all assets provided by the video game studio.
that's right. So anything where an actor was in the screen with the backdrop, that was all actually video game assets in the background. And in the ad itself, I know there's also game footage itself, so that part actually looks a little less realistic than when we used it on our screen. But they're all from the same universe, the same game essentially, all those backdrops.
Great. So basically, just to clarify further, there were no original asset created for this spot. Everything was using video game assets. What about there's like an apartment?
Yeah, so the only original assets that were created were the 2 apartments. The one where Rich is sitting in his apartment in the beginning, his wall explodes, so that's one original asset. And then there's another apartment asset that was created for, I think, the player 2, where they're like in their VR goggles on that set.
How long does it take to perfect one of these assets to the quality that we saw here from just being a video game asset?
It was pretty quick. I believe, as soon as we got the assets, it was mostly, I don't even think it required a whole lot of optimizing. It was more parsing through which scenes we were actually going to use, because they basically gave us almost every single scene that was available that we could play through, but we didn't need to use all of them. So it was kind of culling through, which ones we wanted to use. So that was probably what took the most amount of time. And then probably just getting ready, the different assets. So in some of the shots, there are like explosions and animations, and then there's also like characters, like goons or thugs back there that are shooting back at the player. And those were actually added, I guess like a video game maker would. So you just go in there and add them in, because they were also assets from the game. And then we just basically optimized it to the shots that we wanted to do.
Was there anything unique that was done for the first time on this project, particularly for virtual production?
I know this is Johnny's first project, but like David Klassen, he was the DP, and Marshall, he was the production designer. And we had seen them actually work on a different project with us called Discovery's Explorers Club.
Tales from the Explorers Club?
Tales from the Explorers Club, which we can also pull up a clip from their stuff later. And that was like, you know, like not a video game shoot, but that was actually like traveling all over different parts of the world. I think they went to like space, under the ocean, in the Himalayas. They were like everywhere across the world, and they were shooting in this stage for about a week, like 7 days or so, and essentially like got enough footage to cover for the entire series, which I think is on Discovery Plus. I guess it might be on Max now, that you could watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, essentially, I think it's like a 6-episode series, and they basically got all of the stuff they needed, and they did it in such a short amount of time. And a lot of times, it wasn't even like very like detailed backdrops or anything that they were using on that. So when we saw what their team could do, and then we got this project in the door, we were like, what kind of production team could do this that could really make it convincing? We were really excited to ask David and Marshall, and then they were the ones who recommended Johnny. And essentially, I think this made it a very exciting team, because it was like the first time we got to have filmmakers who, they're not experts at virtual production. I mean, ARwall, we're gonna bring that expertise, but essentially we got filmmakers who really know how to meld, like basically taking a translight and making it look like it's really part of that same atmosphere, same ecosystem that the actor's standing in. And essentially, you know, then being able to extend that with virtual production, which makes it a more interactive backdrop. So I think that was like really exciting for us to get, you know, the best creators and filmmakers in front of the screen, and then, you know, to let ARwall kind of shine back there, or really not shine, but really just meld together magically with everything else.
Johnny, I noticed in the shoot there's treadmills and rotating platforms and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about how those were used, in case people are wondering, like what is that?
Yeah. So I really wanted to have a lot of movement in the piece. I mean, it's a full-on action movie. You can't just shoot the whole thing in one tiny little place. And so the wall is 30 feet wide. It's impressive, but not when you need somebody running or moving, things like that. And so it was kind of, like I had mentioned before, it's a little different way to think. And so we utilized a treadmill so that we could get a running shot. We had a turntable so we could do that cool Michael Bay orbiting shot. We had talked about a couple of different options for various other types of things. But really, I felt like the power of this wall isn't when it's static. The power is when the camera is moving or the talent is moving. And so you could see in the behind the scenes that when the camera is still and the talent is running on the treadmill, it feels huge. It feels like he's running down a big hallway. So you still can get a big sense of scale, even though you don't have a big location to work in. And so when I was talking with David about putting together the shot list, I said, let's shoot it like a car commercial. I want a front 3/4. I want the camera to orbit around it. I want it to go up and boom down. And we want this to feel like our guy is moving through the space. And that's the power of how this thing could work. Now, it does add a lot of an extra set of challenges when the camera is just tethered and the talent's not moving much and it's moving around. It works just fine. When you have to attach a treadmill or a turntable or something else, that wall has to animate. It's like a video that's playing, or, you know, it's keyframed from A to Z, and that has to match with the treadmill or with the turntable. So there is, and it was a learning curve for me, there is another layer that you have to kind of think about, that it's not just a plate that's going up there, it's an actual moving asset. And when I say it now, it sounds like, yeah, duh. But when we were in it, I didn't, you know, really realize until we got onto set, like, oh, yeah, obviously it has to, the guy's running, it's going to be moving in the background. So there were little things like that, that just lessons to learn and things to think about, that scale is possible. You've got the wall, you've got practical elements. So take advantage of that. Back the camera up, Go on a wider lens, 30 feet wide. Give your piece a sense of scale. Don't sit there in a bedroom the whole time or in a coffee shop. If you need to do that. But mix that in with some big, huge, massive visuals, because you don't have to go to the top of Mount Everest. You can shoot it right here, or you don't have to be in a war zone. You can do it right here. Same with the explosions that you saw in the background and the bad guys that were shooting. Those were all on looping videos. So as we were on various time frames, sometimes it was a 10-second loop. So there's a 10-second reset time in between when an explosion goes off that the talent needs to reset, production design needs to move, camera needs to reset to its A mark. Just a different way to work, but there's so much more to do than just have a background. Like, put stuff in the background, animate things in the background, and then just know that you have downtime for that reset.
Did you learn anything on this project that you, I guess, would do differently next time?
A lot, but all positive stuff. So I think that the animated background that I was just talking about, I think is the biggest thing that I learned. The first iteration of my shot list was pretty static. Hadn't been in here before, didn't know exactly how it worked, and so my brain just went to stick the talent in the room and kind of move the camera around a little bit. And then it was after some more research and working with ARwall and the DP that I was like, oh, okay, let's add in some more dynamic movement and things like that. So just a learning curve, but everything that you know about traditional filmmaking, everything that you've learned and done over the years, it all applies here. It's just a little different way to get there.
Jocelyn?
Yeah, I guess I like to point out that like oftentimes people come in when they're looking for virtual production, and there are lots of different sized screens out there. And I think a huge number of them are really, really sizable. They're like really massive stages. It kind of makes this stage look a little small. But when you're a filmmaker, it ends up being very expensive to try to rent those stages because there's so much LED walls. There's, the size of the stage is already massive. So you're talking about a really, really large budget. One of the reasons why at ARwall, we ended up with like a smaller size screen here. We had a smaller one here, actually, a 20-foot wide one. Before this one here, which is now 30 feet wide.
That's what we did Muppets Haunted Mansion on.
That's right. We did shoot Muppets Haunted Mansion on a screen smaller than this. And that was like a 40-minute feature, I guess, 45-minute feature. So, and that film was about 70% shot on virtual production. And we actually got that all done on a smaller screen than the one you're seeing behind me. One of the reasons why we went with a smaller screen is, at ARwall, we're half video game makers, developers, and the other half are creators, filmmakers. So like Rene and I, we started in indie budget filmmaking. So we didn't have massive budgets to make like tentpole films or spend all sorts of money on things you didn't need. We basically had to be, what can we get away with and make it look like we have had a lot more. So when we went with an LED wall, we went with something smaller, but we also went with a smaller pitch. So this is a 1.5 millimeter pitch screen behind me. And the screen before was also 1.5 millimeter pitch. That basically just means the distance between the light diodes on the LED wall. And the reason that matters is that the tighter pitch they are, the more expensive that panel becomes, because it's like kind of getting closer to a television screen, right? When you have a TV, the light diodes are so close to each other, you can't see the little black spaces between the light diodes at all. And so if you imagine that this was a huge TV behind me, that would be really expensive because it's like there's no space between the light diodes. But 1.5 millimeter pitch is pretty small for LED walls, because when you look at the really massive LED walls on different virtual production stages, they tend to be around 2.5, 2.6, sometimes even 3.0 millimeter pitches. And when it's that wide, you can't actually bring the camera as close to the screen. So that means you have to pull the camera back, and the screen size actually ends up needing to be even larger because you're pulling the camera further away from the screen. So while we do have a smaller screen width and height-wise compared to the other stages, our millimeter pitch is very small. This is one of the smaller pitches. If it gets any smaller, you basically can't move it and it breaks a lot. So 1.5 is pretty good. You can get the camera really darn close to the screen, which means...
How close can you get it to this screen?
So I think like 9 feet is like the general like recommendation, but I know on Muppets that Craig, the DP on that, he pushed his camera even closer to 9 feet. I think it was like Gonzo. I don't even, it was
There was a close-up of Gonzo where
Yeah.
he was 6 feet off the wall.
Yeah, and he was super close with
He was over here, and I was having a panic attack because I didn't realize how shallow focus it was, but it worked out.
Yeah, so, you know, when you screen like this, you can do a lot more stuff because you can really push your camera really close to the screen, which means you have a lot more real estate than it actually looks like. And then on top of that, why I jumped into this whole long discussion about millimeter pitches is because on this shoot for Crossfire, one of the first things we got to really test out was, you know, the turntable to turn to actor and also the treadmill shots. Because like to us, like to do that shot normally, I guess with LED walls, if you don't actually move the virtual backdrop, you would need a massive screen that is like maybe a circle around your actor or just really, really long in order to have the actor kind of running down this long corridor, right? And so these are the kinds of things that we kind of really love innovating on. We want to make it so that, you know, you have the actor on a treadmill, he can be running for forever. You know, we could have all sorts of backdrop stuff. Could make him look like he's running really fast or really slow or he's really small or, you know, there's all sorts of cool trick shots that can be done. Just like, you know, this is, I think, the nature of filmmaking is a magic show. It's not, you're not supposed to like spend the most amount of money so that you can make the extravagant thing real. It's to make the extravagant thing possible with the lowest budget possible. And that's really, I think, what we're trying to achieve here, and why we choose a smaller screen, because this is, I think, a little bit more affordable for more budgets. And at the end of the day, I think ARwall really stands for helping more creators and more filmmakers get access to this technology, because I think it's really exciting. But you get to see it on like The Mandalorian or these massive tentpole films, and then, you know, as a filmmaker, you're just like, well, I wish I could be on that set. Well, you don't have to wish with us. Like, come in, check this out. Over in Burbank, we can show you this tech. And like, if there's a shot that you think hasn't been done yet and you're not sure how it can be done, like, that's what ARwall is here for. Like, we want to know what shot you want to do, and then we want to help you make it possible.
Awesome. So let's bring that to potential viewer watching the live stream right now and is concerned about the time and cost of virtual production. What would your advice be to them, other than like hire ARwall, of course? What would be your advice to them as far as how to get started and make sure that they're getting the most out of virtual production? Jonny, do you want to start? You mentioned all that tech scouting that you were doing.
I mean, I guess no location fees. You can shoot, well, I mean, you got a stage fee, but like, it's not like you have to go to 10 different locations. So I think for a shoot that requires many different locations, something that would require 10 hours of sunset, something like that, something where you wanted to do an action piece and you can't blow a bunch of stuff up, things like that. I think that it makes a heck of a lot of sense. But every budget is different, and so the producers just have to get kind of creative with the push and pull, because you remove some fees by using this, but you know, there is a cost associated with that. Is sometimes more than what just a green screen or a warehouse might be. So every project is different, but I think you just have to kind of run through it and say, what does the creative want and what is your vision?
Awesome. So you're saying there's specific scenarios where you would choose this technology because it's a time and cost saving.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And given the choice, I would choose this over green, but it's not always my decision. So
I hear you. Jocelyn?
How to get started with virtual production.
Well, specifically concerned about time and cost.
Concerned about time and cost. Well, I guess, you know, one of the first times virtual production on an LED wall was done was when we were involved in a television show called Nightflyers. That one, we did a cost analysis of that one. It was the first time that it was our first job. We were kind of curious, are we actually saving this production time and money? And so when we looked into it, we took a look at all the shots that involved an LED wall with the backdrop, and then compared that to like, how much would it cost if you shot that on green screen and then had a team of visual effects artists like replace that green with what would actually go back there. And it came down to so we did like a cost analysis with like a really cheap visual effects team and like a more mid-grade kind of. I don't think we did really expensive, right? I think we did cheap and mid-grade.
No, we did high-end and mid-end.
Oh, sorry. I guess it was high-end visual effects team and then a mid-grade visual effects team. And the cost analysis was that it was going to basically, it saved that production 62 to 73% off of their visual effects costs. That's quite a lot. And this is like, I think it was like a 10 episode show. You can watch it on Netflix if you like. But essentially, yeah, we're like, that's quite a lot of savings. And if you look at the timing of it, so I think, as soon as they're done shooting, so the timing of virtual production is that a lot of it gets front loaded. So these scenes and assets, they have to be created ahead of time. So that is one thing that kind of like creators and directors and everyone on set kind of have to agree, this is what the shot should look like. There's no more, I mean, you could still change it in post, but like why do so when you have this luxury of being able to do it ahead of time? So essentially, that pre-production time becomes really important, but essentially you can preload that visual effects work that someone might do in post production and do it during pre-production. And the nice thing is that it does actually save time because the artist really only has to create that asset like once, as long as we know what every angle, every shot, and sometimes we don't know every angle and every shot, and we come up with a brand new one on set as long as the asset can support it. And then you're basically done with the shot. You can collaborate with everyone on set and go, that doesn't look right, the color doesn't look right, or, we make those minor adjustments on set really quickly. So it's like anybody else on set, with the makeup, hair, the costumes, the props, the production design, you make those minute adjustments on set with the virtual production as well. And then when you finish shooting, you're done, really. That shot is essentially done. You might need to do some color grading afterwards, but you don't have to do green screen work. You don't have to do, a whole lot of other visual effects, not really. For Crossfire, we had to add, a few extra like dust hits and stuff like that because, given enough pre-production time, we could have probably done that on set too, which is 3 weeks is a little short for our engineers to perfect that on set. So maybe with more time, I bet we could have done all of it in pre-production, and then it would have just been in the shot itself. So
You're saying that the muzzle flashes and the bullet hits could have been virtual if you had time.
Yeah, like we could probably have tracked where the gun was pointed at the LED wall, and then just approximated that so that at the camera it would look like the muzzle flash is happening either like in front of the frame or in the mid frame or in the back of the in the backdrop itself. So there's lots of kind of cool things that are possible. We get enough time in pre-production, and then but this one was so short that we didn't quite get to that one, so we just determined that was going to be easier, cheaper, and faster to just do that part in post.
Okay, so it sounds like based on what you guys have described, there's a time and cost savings because there's minimal post visual effects, minimal location moves and company moves to different locations. So that's where the cost savings are coming from, and that's where the 62 to 73% compared to traditional filmmaking is coming from.
Traditional green screen film.
Traditional green screen. Okay, perfect. Awesome. That is my final question, which means we're opening it up to Q&A from the audience here. Yeah, absolutely. So tracking synchronization with the treadmill, the turntable, and the camera. Jocelyn?
So the camera's always tracked. So regardless of what's happening in the backdrop, we always have a little tracker on it, which you can kind of see on this camera over here, which is the hero camera. If that camera moves, it basically changes the perspective of the backdrop behind me because it's trying to track what should look correct for that camera perspective. And so the camera is always tracked, and that's a feature you can turn on or off depending on what shot you're doing, but usually it's on. As far as like the animated shots that we had mentioned, those were some of them, like the treadmill shot and the one on the turntable, those are I guess like pre-animated sort of. So that changes like basically the backdrop as far as like we could be moving left or right to make it look like we're tracking one direction or another. Like the camera is doing it, but the camera is staying still. The actor's mimicking a movement, and then the backdrop is kind of like changing and moving as if the camera's moving. And so that can be like created ahead of time. And essentially we can adjust that on the fly on set as well. But essentially, we kind of do an approximation of what we think the movement will be, and then we can kind of quicken the speed, slow down the speed. Which I think you might hear me on the BTS video. It's like, oh, I think we need to quicken it up, which is just me saying, oh, that backdrop doesn't look like it's matching the speed that the actor's running in, so I think we need to match that. There's another way that we could have done that, which I think if we had more time in pre-production, we could have done, which is we could my engineers are always talking about different ways to track these things. So like we were thinking about doing like pointing a laser at the treadmill so that you can tell how fast the treadmill is going, and then just have the background kind of match that speed depending on how fast it's like reading the treadmill's going. Same goes with like the turntable. So on this production, because it was so quick, we just did it manually. We just did it by by hand and by eye, basically. So we animated like a big circle around one space in the virtual space, and then put the actor on a turntable, and then I think essentially the production just like manually changed the speed for the turntables to match what was in the background. But there's another way you could do it, is we could put a tracker on that little turntable, and just as it's turning, then our machine would go, oh, it's going this fast, and then just turn the background to that speed. So
it seemed that would make sense to have whatever the belt drive would drive the speed of the enemy.
Exactly, yeah. I think if we had a whole lot of shots with those, we probably would have spent, and we had the pre-production time to build that. I think we probably would have done it, but since it was only like 2 or 3 shots, we decided to just kind of like, exactly.
Yeah.
This was what the time was allowing us to do. Yeah, it probably is as large as the video game map itself is. So for some of those maps, they were pretty sizable. Like, I think the scene, you don't really see in the commercial, but I think we put the apartment in, this opening scene, and essentially the wall like explodes. And then I think in one of our senior engineer basically did like a fly through just to show off how big the space was. So when you flew through the apartment wall, it was like, I don't know, it's like a really wide shot, you might imagine.
Like a kilometer square.
Yeah,
I would
and so
say.
you could see like helicopters in the distance flying around. It was like a mile around of city basically. So some of the assets were very, very sizable that way, and then some of them were like in a hallway, like a corridor. So in those hallways, it's kind of small. So there's all sorts of size things, but essentially it's however big the game makers made it, because that was the assets we were using.
And the resolution matched what you guys were shooting? Like,
yeah, we were a little concerned because I guess VR actually has to be optimized for really good real-time playback, so that you don't feel sick when you're in the goggles. So we were concerned that it might actually not be high enough quality, and we would need to up-res everything. But actually, once we opened it up and threw it on the wall, it was like, actually, this looks fine. We don't really need to up-res this at all. And so we got really lucky, especially with the timeline we had. And so, yeah, we just, I think, basically used it mostly as is.
Yeah.
Just sorry, one last thing. When we flew through the world, there was like 3 or 4 scenes per map that we were looking at. So that's how big the worlds were, that we could get a hallway, and we could get a battleground where a helicopter was coming down, and then there was a whole nother area with several buildings. And so it was big enough to be flexible, to look at various different types of things. So yeah, it was pretty wild.
Awesome. So there's 3 ways that we can generate an environment custom. So the first one is we find a stock asset that already exists, and we customize it to your needs. So what that would look like is, this is something that a lot of people outside of the video game industry may not be familiar with, but when video game studios get into financial trouble, one of the things that they do is they license out all their maps and assets. They put it on marketplaces and sell it for 20 bucks, 40 bucks. And then you can use that royalty free. So there is a ton of stock assets that are at quality to use for this, that are available to download online. So we can even, you can tell me in the morning, Rene, I need Carmel, I need that beach from Carmel, and I need that after lunch. Somebody can literally go download that asset as close as they can to that, and after lunch we'll have that ready for you to shoot on the screen. So that's how easy it can be. The second way is an artist can build the environment just as a traditional visual effects artist would. That's obviously a little bit more costly, but you get exactly what you want. And then the third way, which is probably the most intriguing, is doing so with the assistance of an AI tool. So you can design a 2D panoramic view, a 180-degree panoramic view, and then extrude that into a 3D environment such that you have the parallax and the depth and everything, the distance that you would want from that environment. The only problem with that one is you have a limited vantage point. You only have, let's say, 10 feet, you know, that the camera would be able to move before the illusion starts to break down. Jocelyn reminds me of a fourth way, which is now becoming quite popular because it's available on people's phones and now people's Apple Vision Pro or whatever, which is making a digital twin of an object. So you can go to a location. It doesn't matter how close or how far, you know, you are from it, but probably closer is better. And you literally, you know, with your phone, scan it. There are professional tools that do it as well. And what they'll do is they'll basically capture the RGB information as well as the depth, the actual surface information of the object. So if you did want to create a twin of an actual, like, I have to have this, you know, quarter mile in Connecticut or something like that, it is possible for somebody to do that. Here's the one that's even more crazy. Potentially you could go on Google Street View, you know, go to the beach and go to the Google Street View or Google Earth and kind of get the angle that you need, snap that, and then have an AI make it more photorealistic for you, then pop it into an extrusion. So like it's starting to get, the options are starting to get very, very diverse.
Yeah. So we did adjust the backgrounds. Most of the game footage was, or the game worlds were overly lit, because it's a game, you have to be able to see, and it's a VR game. And so we said, well, we want this to be moodier and we want some color contrast. So we added some lights so that we could get some warm glow against the dark blue, and we brought the exposure down. So we did adjust within reason, because it needed to be close enough to what you would feel in the game. But we did adjust exposure, we turned lights on, we changed where explosions came from, that sort of thing. Yeah. Oh yeah, we maxed it out. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
There were a couple of times where we had to adjust, we kind of had to cheat the background perspective because the camera couldn't be, I wanted the camera to be low looking up at the talent. And so we had to kind of cheat the background so that we could not go over the top.
You mean you tilted the virtual camera up to get a lower angle?
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I can stumble through it. So we had a full overhead grid, and that was on some sort of electronic board. And so we, during the first half of the first day, we kind of walked through each location, and the DP and his G&E team set the looks for each one. So then when we were ready to shoot, it was like, okay, we're going from 1 to 2 to 3, all the way down. And so that overhead provided a lot. And then we had other lights kind of around to help with fill, color contrast, things like that. The explosions at the end of the piece was on a loop, and so we knew what the timing was. We knew that every 10 to 12 seconds that was going to blow. And so the gaffer had all of those ready to go, and we had a big orange light right there to help kind of like supplement the practicalness of the explosion. And so we did a lot of that stuff based on timing. It was pretty much all there. There was like a little bit of fill that would come in, or they would bring in some sort of accent lighting, but for the most part, everything was built and ready to go. Yeah.
Wow. Lighting by numbers, huh?
Well, we designed it that way intentionally because my shot list was far more ambitious than what we had time for. And so the DP did a good job at kind of designing this setup so that there were as few adjustments as possible. And we knew we needed to move the practical elements. Production design needed to adjust between every scene. And so we thought, okay, well, if that's going to take 10 to 15 minutes, that's about how long Genie has to make adjustments. So we have to kind of reverse engineer our plan so that everybody can maximize that little downtime window.
That's actually interesting. Did you find that production design was the department lagging on set?
No, I don't know that there was. I mean, we've all been on set, and there's like some department that slows us down. I don't think we really had that
Nice.
here. I think everybody was pretty on it. Production design was a big deal for this, and I would say that was a takeaway. Uh, the floor was fake because we were pouring dirt and water and all sorts of stuff on it. And so we had a platform, and anything that the talent interacted with, got close to, we had 3 layers of stuff before the wall. And there's, as you can see the wall, there's a flat line. The flat line looks terrible on camera. So anything that you can do to break up that so it's not just a straight break, it can be, it can be a piece of tape. We had like little rubble and blocks and things like that, just so that it's a jagged transition between the floor and the wall does a lot. And we put in a lot of haze as well, just to create some atmosphere. We wanted some of the rays, and I mean, it's a battlefield, so it should feel like that. But we really kind of leaned into that idea of the practical elements are what sell this, because if you're just looking at the wall, it looks pretty darn good, but it looks really good and totally passable when you see a crate that the guy's slamming into and you see some haze coming through the room. So production design, yeah, I mean, and we had a great production designer, so I can't say enough about don't skimp on production design just because you've got the wall.
Exactly. That's Marshall King, that's the production designer on this project. Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, yes, most everything that we run with our plugin is actually for Unreal Engine. And so, which we for this one was on Unreal Engine 4 because the game was built in 4, but we also have 5 and 5.1, soon 5.2 support as well. But essentially, yeah, like most everything is in that game engine. So anything you can do in Unreal Engine, you can do here. We essentially just make sure that the only thing that's different to make it work well with tracking for the camera and on the bigger LED wall is that we try to optimize assets. So, we're not talking about like 8K assets or anything. We're talking about, what's the smallest version of that asset while it still looks correct, right? So that's where the VR game engine or the game asset actually worked out really well because it was already optimized to work really well in real time. And then it just, I think we got really lucky, and with a little additional lighting changes and stuff to make it look more like realistic, made it, look that, like it was real and not a game asset.
I would say the tech day is the most important thing because you can see and you can make those adjustments and say, I want that light on and I want that explosion over there. So you can do that ideally during the tech day. But we all know stuff changes once you put PD in here and you get an actor in there, like it's going to be different. And so we definitely did make changes and even adjusted a background and threw a helicopter in there. And so it takes time, but not as much as I would have expected it to. I mean, they might have been thinking that, but I felt okay. It was all ducks on a pond. I felt all right.
We've definitely been in situations where we realized we could have prepared some alternatives or some dials that made making alternatives easier. So one of the things that we do is when we do get a sense from a filmmaker on a project that they are going to want something on a dial, like they want the sun position on a dial or something like that, we will build that out in the scene so that on the day we're not scrambling to figure out how to make that quick adjustment, but it's something that can be done in like 10 seconds. Then all of a sudden that filmmaker feels empowered to get that perfect. And that's ultimately where we are in the virtual production industry right now. Just to be clear, yes, it's an Unreal Editor, it's Unreal Engine 5. We're showing off our plugin here today. It's called ARFX Pro plugin. It's for Unreal Engine. It's an alternative to NDisplay, which is specifically created for filmmakers to do this for rehearsal and on set. That is what we use to do this project. That's how we dialed it in and did it at speed, at the speed of production. That's right, it's called ARFX Pro plugin. It's available on our website right now if you're interested.
And then you can also make sure to stick around for the demo portion of this after this panel. We've added a bunch of features to kind of make it easier for filmmakers to control what you need. So like lighting and like color changes, gain, all sorts of stuff like that. We've added it so that, you know, and also the Xbox controller, it's here for you guys. Like I might be, you know, tinkering with it, but we created this so that, you know, the director or the DP, anybody on set could be flying around in the backdrop, making changes to the camera angle or whatever. So there's a lot of different things that we've kind of tried to empower the filmmakers to have, you know, control yourselves.
We had a great time here. Hope you had a great time watching, and hope you join us again. For those here in person, thanks so much for coming, and we'll now begin the hands-on demo for you folks. Thank you.